Ben Shapiro is a little bit salty about the U.S. women's soccer team co-captain Megan Rapinoe and her calls for equal pay. Now, during a recent segment, he argued that Rapinoe, while he says is a very talented soccer player, is actually only getting big contracts because she's a, quote, very outspoken lesbian. Watch.
And we're not talking about 1968 in the middle of the civil rights movement with U.S. sprinters on the U.S. national team at the Olympics raising the black power fist because American politics are polarized around race in 68. We're not talking about that. We're talking about gay marriage is legal across the United States by Supreme Court diktat. We are talking about Megan Rapinoe is getting $1 million contracts specifically because of her sexuality and because she is a very, very good soccer player. But let's not make any mistake. If she were a very good soccer player and she were not a very outspoken lesbian, she would be getting fewer contracts because she is seen as a political figure. She's sort of Colin Kaepernick, but with actual talent at her sport. So it's all of this is obnoxious, but we're supposed to pretend that actually she's quite charming and wonderful. That it is not obnoxious to live in the best time for women, in the best time for lesbians, in the best time for women's soccer in the history of the world, and in the best country in the history of the world for any of those things. We're supposed to pretend that actually she's a victim and America's a terrible place so that she can make more money, presumably. Pretty gross.
Pretty gross indeed. And I mean, Ben Shapiro. I mean, she's a very good soccer player, but she's also an outspoken lesbian, and that's why she's getting contracts, and it's making me very, very uncomfortable that I can't actually sexualize her, and maybe she should actually shut up because she's making lots of money, and how dare she try to make her team make more because of, capitalism. Okay. Plenty of salt there. Very salty. Okay. So now, you think that the part of the reason of why she's getting contracts is because she's an outspoken lesbian, right? When it's funny because the only reason that she first got in the news to begin with is because she ended up, her and her team won the World Cup. That would mean that she is a very talented soccer player and also a leader. So now let me cede a slight point to Ben Shapiro. Again, she led her team to winning the World Cup. No small feat at all. But then, after she got the attention for that, she then went on to make right-wing heads like Ben Shapiro's explode. So now, did she get extra attention for that? Does that make her more popular? Yes. You know why it makes her more popular? Because people like Ben Shapiro are douchebags. And so when you dunk on a douchebag, and when you dunk on people like Donald Trump, that makes you even more popular. I mean, to me, again, as someone who doesn't care about sports, I have come to be more endeared by her. Why? Again, because of the fact that she dunks on people like Ben Shapiro. And I feast on his tears. Just saying. Now, if you didn't notice, because of all the fast talking, right? He admitted that she was a very talented soccer player. And then later on goes on to say that she's not actually that great of a soccer player. He said, I certainly have no particular love for women's soccer, mainly because I care about skill level, and women's soccer isn't at the skill level of men's soccer, not really even teenage boys soccer in any case. She's a very good soccer player, but also not equivalent to a 13-year-old. Okay, Ben. You know what? I would love to see you take on Megan Rapinoe. Or even 13-year-old boys. Probably wouldn't go well for you. I mean, it'd be fun to watch. Then again, you could confuse Ben Shapiro with a 13-year-old boy anyway. I'm just saying. Now, he did also make an argument that the women didn't deserve equal pay, which is what they've been asking for, because, well, I mean, we live in a capitalist system, so, if you're not getting paid very well, it's because of capitalism, and it doesn't have to do with anything else. Really? Okay. Again, the purpose behind that is him saying, or I guess the reason he says that is, well, they don't sell as many tickets, so they don't deserve as much money. They don't make as much money, so they get less revenue, right? Now, from a financial standpoint, he's actually wrong. I know, big shocker, right? The women's team has actually done really well for themselves, despite some disadvantages. Now, the Wall Street Journal found that the U.S. women's soccer games actually earned more than the men's games in total during the 3 years after the women's team won the World Cup in 2015. Now, in years previous to that, the men's team did make more money, but it turned out that win actually galvanized a lot of people and said, hey, you know what? We're going to start paying attention to these ladies because they're kicking ass on the field. And that is interesting for us to watch. So now, specifically from the years between 2016 and 2018, the women's team brought in $50.8 million in revenue, while the men's team brought in about $49.9 million in revenue. That's actually a difference between of less than 2% in the women's favor. So now, if you're Ben Shapiro, you think, oh, it's only 2%. It doesn't really matter because the men traditionally makes more money anyway. You libtard snowflake. But hold on here. Keep in mind that there are certain advantages enjoyed by the men's team that are not enjoyed by the women's team. For example, you have the issue of advertising. The men's soccer team is advertised very heavily, and they have very multi-million-dollar contracts with ESPN and Fox, right? Whereas the women's team barely gets advertised, and their championship game ends up being posted on YouTube. So there are a lot of factors here. And yet with all those factors, the fact that they were so good and won their, the U.S. Women's Cup, and actually instilled some pride in our nation when it came to soccer, well, that got a lot of people interested in watching them. So it's a lot more factors and not having to do anything with skill level. So naturally, of course, social media, they decided to weigh in on this. And I just love these tweets. Julia Claire says, there's never been such a delicate, hypersensitive snowflake in the history of the world as Ben Shapiro. Noah Berlatsky says, Ben Shapiro, praised in the New York Times as a cutting-edge intellectual, shows his seriousness by attacking a star athlete for daring to be gay. Right, definitely. John says, same energy as Ben Shapiro begging AOC for a debate, which is so sad. Sleeping Giant says, and Ben Shapiro gets paid by advertisers in spite of the fact that it's a very outspoken bigot. Now, you want to talk about what is gross, by the way. Because his whole assumption here is, well, Megan Rapinoe, yes, she's a good soccer player and everything, but she's also outspokenly gay, and she is using her gayness in order to get better contracts to make more money. Whereas Ben Shapiro is using his 13-year-old boynish to try to get money from fossil fuel billionaires. I mean, you want to talk about who funds Ben Shapiro. It's Koch brothers. It's oil companies and right-wing billionaires. That's who funds this guy. Molly Jung Fast says, I'm starting to suspect this Ben Shapiro feller might be sexist. Darth Sweetums says, and add soccer to the list of things Shapiro likes to lecture on, but knows nothing about. And you know what? I also know nothing about soccer. I do not play sports. That's why I'm not lecturing you on sports. Jared Lipoff says, Rapinoe is roommates with AOC in the rent-free apartment in Beden's head. That's fun. And so finally, that's the final tweet, but one more thing to say here. It's almost as if there's something about, and this is what I've noticed from Shapiro and a lot of these right-wingers who argue against things like equal pay and all that. They just seem to have a problem in general with women. There seems to be something that bothers them so much about women asserting their rights, specifically women of color and women who are of different sexual preferences than he is. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, You know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.